Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. Handcuffed in front of her high school, this phone call that changed an entire system. An autumn Thursday, in the quiet town of Crescent Hill, a wealthy residential area nestled in the heart of the Virginia, the day was ending in apparent harmony. The sky was a soft blue, dotted with wispy clouds, and the air carried that particular late October freshness, the kind that stings the cheeks slightly but warms the heart with the scent of dead leaves. The trees lining the sidewalk stood like flaming torches, in robes of fire, red maples, golden oaks, orange sweetgums, whose leaves were scattered across the sidewalks like an autumn carpet. The rustling of footsteps on these carpets of leaves, mixed with the joyful shouts of students leaving the high school, composed a soundtrack to the peaceful end of the day. In front of the wrought iron gates of Fellowship Public Thurgood Marshall students trickled out, some in tight groups, others with headphones on, their faces tense with homework or relaxed with the approaching weekend. Laughter erupted in places, calls could be heard, and a few parents waited in air-conditioned SUVs, engines purring. In the midst of this youth on the move was Naomi Carter, 17 years old, in an impeccably ironed burgundy uniform, white blouse and striped tie. Her upright posture, her lively gaze, and her determined step testified to a confidence rare for her age. Her black curls framed an intelligent, gentle but resolute face. That day, she was holding against her Atabate binder, her notes still fresh from a presentation she had just brilliantly concluded on civil disobedience in the history of civil rights. Naomi wasn't your average student. She shone brightly, but without arrogance. She asked tough questions in class. She reached out to new students. She read James Baldwin on the bus and dreamed of becoming Supreme Court Justice, like her father before her, but in her own way, more militant, more anchored in reality. She had just been admitted to Princeton, a framed acceptance letter from her mother on the family sideboard. A quiet pride reigned in the Carter household, not only because Naomi excelled, but because she embodied the living legacy of several generations of struggle, exile, and resilience. His father, Judge Elijah Carter, born in a small segregated town in Mississippi, had climbed every step of the judicial system by the strength of his convictions. His mother, Grace Morrell Carter, born in Port-au-Prince, had survived the political upheavals of her country before teaching French-language literature at a state university. Naomi, for her part, walked between these worlds, between two cultures, between two stories of resistance. That Thursday, she felt light-hearted. She sent a message to her mother to tell her that she was going to visit her best friend, Layla, before heading home. His gym bag slapped gently against his hip, his shoes crunched on the leaves, and in his headphones, a playlist mixed jazz and alternative hip-hop. She had no idea that, in 3 minutes, a patrol was going to target her. She didn't know that her uniform, her composure, her school bag, her skin color, all of it was about to become suspect. She didn't know that this peaceful Thursday would become a Thursday of shame, of struggle, and of truth. For on that day, Crescent Hill's tranquil veneer was about to crack. And a bright, respectful, and uneventful black teenage girl was going to bed ragged like a criminal, not for what she had done, but for what she represented in the eyes of those who still refused to see humanity in its skin. As she walked alone along the sidewalk, her gaze fixed on her phone screen, a sports bag slung over her shoulder flapping lightly against her hip, Naomi Carter was enjoying the last rays of the sun filtering through the orange branches. She had just sent a message to her mother, "I'm going to Layla's, I'll be home by 6 p.m. A banal message, from a banal day, until everything changes. The purr of an engine slowing caught her attention. She looked up to see a patrol car pull up alongside her, moving at a walking pace like a predator watching its prey. She immediately recognized the two men inside. Agent Richard Harlan, with a lined face, a clenched jaw, and Officer Matthew McDougal, young, square, hard-eyed. In the neighborhood, their names were whispered with fear and weariness, especially in black families. Not because they were effective, but because they were unpredictable, brutal, and obsessed with authority. Naomi slowed, uncertain. Then Harlan's harsh voice burst forth, breaking the autumnal calm. "Hey you! Stop right there." She stopped dead in her tracks, her brows furrowed. Me? She asked, confused but polite. The sharp sound of the door slamming made her jump. Harlan was walking straight toward her, already in an intimidating stance, his hand on his belt as if to remind her of his weapon. Didn't you hear? Put your bag down. Hands up. Right now. Panic rose in Naomi's chest. She glanced around. A few students were still leaving the building, some staring at her, puzzled. She hesitated for a moment, then obeyed. Slowly, she placed her gym bag on the floor, raised her hands, her voice trembling. I just came from high school. I have class here. This is my bag. McDougal got out as well. He walked around the car and, without a word, grabbed Naomi's bag and began to search it without permission. He searched methodically, emptying the contents onto the sidewalk, a water bottle, notebooks, gym socks, a hairspray. It looks like you fit the description of a suspect, he said without looking at her, with a mechanical and casual tone. What suspect? I didn't do anything, Naomi tried, her throat tight. She took a breath to keep calm. Slowly, she took out her student card from the inside pocket of his jacket and held it out to Harlan. Here's my badge. I've been teaching here for 3 years. My name is Naomi Carter. But Harlan didn't even bother to read. He stared at her as if he were reading something else on her face. Something no card could erase. He nodded to McDougal. You probably have a card, yeah. But it might be stolen. Or faked. We'll check it out at the station. Before she could even reply, Harlan grabbed her shoulder and spun her around. The cold metal of the handcuffs clicked around her wrists. She let out a small cry, both in pain and shame. The ground seemed to collapse beneath his feet. She felt her forehead touch the still warm hood of the patrol car. His cheek rubbed against the paint. She wanted to scream, to run away, to disappear. But all she could do was cry silently. Around her, the world stopped. Some students froze. Some took out their phones and were filming while shaking. Teachers approached, shocked, helpless. She heard a voice she recognized. It's Naomi. What are they doing? Another one. She's one of my students. She's in the debate club. She didn't do anything. But the 2 policemen were unaware of all this. They heard nothing. Or rather, they refused to listen. In their eyes there was neither doubt nor compassion. There was only one conviction: they had the right. The right to stop. The right to dominate. The right not to explain. They pushed her towards the car like a criminal. Naomi, her wrists bruised, her head bowed, could already hear the buzz of social media, the whispers in the school corridors, the looks of pity or fear, and her mother's voice in her head: never let anyone make you believe you are worth less than you are. Naomi's cries, muffled by her wounded dignity, were no longer alone in the air. All around, phones were being raised. Students, frozen between fear and indignation, filmed what they saw without believing it. Respected, brilliant student, handcuffed like a criminal in front of her own high school. Some were whispering, others were starting to cry. A teenage girl cried out. But it's Naomi Carter. She won the district speech contest. Tensions were rising. A teacher stepped out of the building, but stopped dead in his tracks, frozen. Then a familiar figure cut through the crowd. Madam Harriet Harris, an English teacher and leader of the debate club, came running in, her jacket flapping behind her, her silver curls swaying with every step. Usually calm and level-headed, this time she wore the fire of a wounded mother in the gaze. Stop. Stop right now, she screamed. She stood in front of the police officers, arms outstretched like a human shield. She didn't do anything. She's one of my students. One of the best. She just came out of a debate class. She got into Princeton, for God's sake. But Harlan and McDougal remained marble. They didn't look down. They did not back down. They brandished their authority as a shield against the truth, as if their uniform was enough to erase all protest, as if the absurdity of their gesture was less important than their wounded pride. Harlan, contemptuously, simply said, "Move along, madam. This is none of your business." But Mrs. Harris, trembling with rage, took out her phone. She punched in a number she knew, but never imagined she would have to dial. In this context her voice cracked slightly as she said, "Elijah, it's Harriet. They arrested Naomi. In front of the school. They handcuffed her." "Yes. Right away." Silence at the end of the line. Then she added, "I'm here. I'm staying with her." 10 minutes later. The deep roar of a black SUV broke the shocked silence that reigned in the street. The vehicle stopped right in the middle of the road, without indicating, without hesitation. Passers-by, students, even the police officers turned their heads. The rear door opened with calculated slowness. A man came down. Tall, elegant, in a dark suit and long black coat, he had a calm but formidable build. His face was carved in marble, imperturbable, icy, tense like a bow ready to break. His dark eyes shone with a cold, contained anger, that of powerful men who know exactly what they will do, and what they will destroy. Elijah Carter. Federal judge. Naomi's father. And today, a helpless witness to an irreversible injury. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Each word fell like a sentence. "Take those handcuffs off him. Now." The two officers stood frozen. McDougal opened his mouth, clearly ready to justify the unjustifiable. But Harlan, a moment more lucid, cautiously asked, "And you are?" Elijah took a step closer. Slow. Controlled. But each of his movements seemed to push back the air itself. "I'm his father. And also the federal judge you'll soon be meeting in court. I advise you, very seriously, to think carefully about your next words." Around them, silence had frozen. All that could be heard was the rustling of leaves and the beeps of cell phones recording every second of this unprecedented scene. McDougal then tried, in an uncertain voice. "We thought," she matched the description of a suspect. But Elijah wasn't even listening. He had just walked around the car and gently knelt down in front of his daughter, still handcuffed, her eyes red, her breathing ragged. "Are you okay, my love?" he asked in a soft, heartbroken voice. Naomi tried to answer. No words came out. She nodded silently, tears rolling down her cheeks, unable to believe what she was experiencing, unable to ignore the crowds, the telephones, and above all, shame stuck to his skin like a burn. So, in front of the whole school, in front of teachers, students, and especially the cameras, the two officers removed the handcuffs. The metallic clinking sounded like an echo of humiliation. More the damage was done. A student's phone posted the video to TikTok before Elijah even picked his daughter up. A few hours later, on social media, the video was shared under the title, "She was leaving school. The police handcuffed her." Then her father arrived. In one night she reached more than 2.4 million views, causing a national outcry. The next morning, the doors of Thellusea Public Thurgood Marshall opened under a low, gray sky, but the atmosphere was anything but calm. Around the school, a veritable media hive had formed. Cameras, microphones, and journalists looking for testimonies and images occupied the sidewalk, surrounding the school like a pack ready to devour the truth. On social media, the video posted the day before was circulating on repeat, already racking up millions of views. The title said it all, in a simple and brutal way. "Police handcuff black student for no reason, then learn who she is." The comments poured in, carrying a muted but powerful anger. What if she hadn't been the daughter of a judge? She would have ended up in the station without help. This is why our children are afraid to walk alone in the street. Shameful. Another racist abuse of power. This is not an isolated case, it is a system that works like this. In this wave of growing indignation, the weight of silence was finally broken. The judicial and administrative machinery was set in motion. The pressure became unbearable. The two agents, Richard Harlan and Matthew McDougall, were immediately suspended off their functions, while the internal investigation takes place. The Crescent Hill police chief was summoned before an ethics commission, where he had to answer for the management calamitous nature of the incident. The Virginia Attorney General announced a disciplinary investigation, promising transparency and sanctions. Meanwhile, the distraught school community organized rallies, discussions on systemic racism, and support sessions for students traumatized by the event. Naomi's father, despite his stature as a lawyer accustomed to measured speeches and balanced pleas, could not contain his emotion. In a room packed with journalists, in front of a collection of microphones and cameras, he spoke, his voice firm but full of pain. What happened to my daughter is not an isolated case. This is not simply a procedural error or a misunderstanding. It is a symptom of a much deeper problem. My daughter wasn't just arrested. She was humiliated, suspected, and belittled. All for one reason, the color of her skin. I refuse to let this country wallow in denial and indifference. His gaze swept the assembly. We will use all means of justice to ensure that this kind of abuse stops. The applause was hearty and sincere. But in her father's eyes, Naomi read the gravity of the fight that was beginning. The following months were difficult for Naomi. The trauma of being treated as a suspect, as a threat, left deep scars. She faced sleepless nights, doubts, angry outbursts, and sometimes a feeling of isolation. But Naomi decided to turn this pain into strength. Supported by her family, her teachers, and civil rights groups, she continued her studies with more determination than ever. A few months later, a major national racial justice organization awarded him excellence scholarship. Naomi integrated Princeton in the fall, with a double specialization, constitutional law and sociology. After a year, she was invited to give a speech at the prestigious National Summit of Young Leaders, in Washington, D.C. Before an audience of young activists, academics and political decision-makers, she declared, her voice clear and full of conviction. I wasn't arrested because I was guilty. I was stopped because, in their eyes, I didn't belong. Today I take this place again, and I will stay there, for the others who cannot speak. His speech was hailed as an act of courage and commitment. Naomi had become a symbol, a hope. Justice finally struck. Agents Harlan and McDougall were officially dismissed for false arrest, abuse of power and racial discrimination. Their careers ended in obscurity, overshadowed by their own mistakes. For its part, the high school Thurgood Marshall decided to honor Naomi in a lasting way. The main auditorium was renamed Naomi Carter Room, a tribute to his dignity, his resilience, and his struggle. A reminder to all that dignity cannot be begged for. Let her defend herself.